So apologise for this, we've gone to a different location. As I was covering just now about FTSE tracker funds, it's evident that if you follow a tracker fund and things are very difficult in that particular market, especially in the top 100 shares, where you get things like airlines that are falling, what happens is that you're just following something over a cliff, and there is a really good argument, especially in times like this, not to be using tracker funds. There are certain markets where it can work, certain times when it doesn't, but it's very important if you are doing this, go and seek professional financial advice, because your portfolio in the last week will have fallen, whereas others will not have fallen by anywhere near that amount, and in some examples would have risen. So I always say about markets, you need professional advice. Do not think you can do it yourself or listen to your mate or friend who thinks you can just do it by going online or buy cheap tracker funds. It really does not work. And the other thing is buying individual shares. People have lost a lot of money this year doing that as well. So be very, very careful. As far as boxing is concerned this week, I suppose I can say that the news about boxing is about news about no news. We've seen the announcement of Fury Joshua, which I find to be one of the strangest announcements ever, because you're talking about boxers that have other commitments way before this, and they're talking about having a fight arranged for next year, a 2-fight deal that's not contractually signed, but they've agreed terms. That's really a publicity stunt. If anybody believes that that's a firm contract that's in place, that makes no sense. An agreement in principle can be done sometimes for publicity reasons, not for contractual reasons, but really nobody really believes that that means that that fight is done, because it isn't. A fight is not done until it's contracted, and these fighters have other obligations to deal with beforehand. So I found that really strange, that news, as if this deal was done, but it was done for a lot of publicity, and I think it attained that publicity. So let's now deal with Help to Buy, which is the main focus of this week's lockdown lowdown. What was Help to Buy? Well, it was brought out in 2013 by the Conservative government, 3 years into the David Cameron administration. Why was it done and why was it developed? Because we're talking about nearly 240,000 people have bought a property under Help to Buy. Some have benefited, the very early purchasers of Help to Buy have benefited a bit from it, perhaps not as much as they would have benefited if they had bought a property non-Help to Buy. But it's just, let's look at what it was. It was restricted to new build, and the government would give a loan of 20% or 40% inside London to those people buying a new build property who could come up with 5% deposit. So what were the advantages of this? Well, number one, it would enable someone to buy on paper a better home than they could actually really afford, if you call that an advantage. Number two, which is this is a realistic advantage, and probably, in my opinion, the only real advantage, is that when somebody on a Help to Buy applied for a mortgage, they would be in effect applying for a 75% loan to value. So the lenders would give them a better deal at that time than they would have rather than if they had a 5% deposit and they were going for a 95% loan to value. So that was a genuine advantage of that deal. The third advantage, which may not be an advantage, was you were getting a 20% or 40% amount of money loaned to you or given by the government with no interest for a 5-year period. But you would have to pay it back. So, and what would then happen would there would be a second charge on the property by the government for the amount of money that they had loaned you. So you now have a second charge. Now, what are the problems? Now, for those people in the early days, in 2013, you got a surge in house prices. The reason that the Help to Buy was introduced, in my opinion, was governments don't win elections on falling property prices. And in 2013, the market was overvalued. But obviously with the Tories knew they were 3 years into a parliament. So they needed to try and push up the house price, make sure the housing market was going in an upward trajectory, and that would enable them, hopefully, to get re-elected the next time that they went for an election. At the same time, it therefore got house builders building houses. But what was happening then was you then ended up with a two-tier approach. Because it was only available to new builds, then a builder would build a block and you would buy a property in that block. They would finish that development with all the Help to Buy properties, and then they would build a block down the road. Now, let's say it was a £300,000 property and you paid $300,000, and they build a block down the road and they put their same property on for $305,000, and a year later you're sitting with your £300,000 house, assuming that prices had not risen. You'd probably only get $260,000 for that property, because there was a differential in price. You could no longer, it was a second-hand property, you could no longer sell it to first-time buyers, and new builds were selling at a premium. In other words, at a much higher price than the actual asset was worth. Similarly to buying a brand new car and driving out the showroom and losing a lot of money, except this is as a much higher value of asset, and it can be quite damaging. Now, the negativity of this was sort of got rid of by the fact that prices during this period of time were rising. So therefore, the fact that people were going into negative equity, which in effect what they were doing, was sort of undone by the fact that the market went up. So for that purpose, that wasn't really as big a problem as it is today. But those people that have bought in recent times are sitting now in negative equity and on the verge of a house price fall going forward. Now, where are the problems now? Well, the problems are that people that are going to buy these particular properties now are going to buy an asset that is 20% overpriced in certain areas, and they're going immediately into negative equity. Many of the people buying these properties are buying on, say, 2-year mortgage deals because they are the cheapest ones. They come to the end of 2 years, they're sitting in negative equity, they've got a second charge on their property, and they can't remortgage because no other lender is going to want the deal. And the existing lender then will offer them something, perhaps. But what happens if then that existing lender decides that they need to recoup some of the money, and they can push the interest rates up? So you could sit there after 2 years with having to pay a much, much higher interest rate than you were paying day one, with the fact that the property is not, you can't sell it because you're in negative equity. So it is a very difficult position to be in. The third issue that's a problem is you can only maximum a 25-year term on Help to Buy mortgages. Whereas if you take a normal second-hand property, or it's not Help to Buy, you could do a 35-year mortgage. And the objective of that is payments can be lower, so are more affordable. So, and you can buy a property like that without having to go immediately into negative equity, which is a very important thing to consider. I understand the idea of going to look at these flashy show homes, it all looks good, it all looks wonderful, but you have to understand what can happen 2, 3, 4 years down the line. So, you've now got a situation where potentially you could be in negative equity even in 5 years' time if, for example, the market does not rise. And now after 5 years, interest rates could have risen, and now that you now have got to deal with this 20% of the loan to the government, what now happens is you start off with paying interest at 1.75% on that government equity, and then that interest will tick. The interest rate will tick up at a minimum of RPI plus 1%, which can be another 6%. 6% of the 1.75% recycled on each year. So it can mean that your interest starts to spiral up. And even if the prices were to move up, like the people that bought in 2013, the government will take a share of that asset value. So there are really big negatives there. Going forward, there's another problem. In 2021, there are regional price caps coming in, which means that the amount of property you can buy is less, which that's not a problem for me. But it is now going to only apply to first-time buyers. So those people that have a home under Help to Buy and want to move home after April next year are now a second-time buyer. That's a problem. They are technically, have to redeem that 20%? Then if they buy the second property, they can't have Help to Buy. They are in problems, and they may have to go to mum and dad to try and bail them out. This is why I have a major issue with this type of purchase. But thank God there is some good news, because at the moment in 2023 this scheme is going to end, and that to me is good news. I understand that people are trying to ask the government to try and extend it because they are worried about the market falling, which is a big issue. But are the government going to be able to prop up this policy, which I don't think is a good policy, with more money, bearing in mind where we sit today? So Help to Buy, if you are going to consider buying Help to Buy, I strongly recommend, it's not the mortgage broker you need to speak to, because the mortgage broker will just arrange your mortgage. You need to speak to a financial planner, advisor, who can really help you through and understand what you're doing. The mortgage broker's not that job. The mortgage broker's there to supply you with a mortgage, not to tell you or advise you a financial strategy whether something is right or wrong, and to identify all the negatives associated with it. Very important that you understand that, and I hope that we've clarified that. I've been asked to talk about Help to Buy, but it's something that everybody should consider very closely. Do we have any questions?
Yep, so we've got Julio. He says, how has your opinion changed regarding the status of the financial markets and boxing compared to the start of the pandemic?
Well, boxing I've not checked. So let's look at boxing first. It's very easy. I've done lots of articles, Sun newspaper, Mirror, Boxing Monthly, Independent last week. My issue is that my thing is still the same, that boxing cannot resume without a vaccine, and it looks to me probably earliest for small hall boxing to go back where it was March next year. I still have that opinion, but it's got to remain fluid, depending on whether we get this Oxford vaccine. But my thing on that is no different. My view on financial markets, without giving specific advice, is that in any situation there is an opportunity. Just because something falls in value or there is a crash, volatility brings about opportunity, but you have to be in the right investments to be successful in the opportunity. Unfortunately, there are winners and losers of every single market situation, and obviously we try and ensure that our clients are the winners.
Okay, we've got Tim Brown. He says, hi Steve, hope you're well.
Tim.
My questions from Twitter. Number one, the Boxing Board of Control released the fights for the English and British titles.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't they do this for the southern, northern area, etc.? And secondly, Steve, in the past you have said if you stream your fights, the boxers would lose ticket sales. Is this the same if they go to fight on Sky or BT?
Right, okay. So firstly, let's deal with the first question, which is about the southern area. The way that the board operate is that they only, at the board level, main board level, they deal with English level fights and above, and there are local councils around the country which merge from southern area, central area. And I think it's a really good point, because I think that area titles should be put out on the board bulletins, but they're not. They are done at local level and directives given to the various managers, promoters in that area. But I think it's a really, really good thing, because I think that there would be no harm in, when the board do their monthly bulletins, in having the area titles on there. But it is something that they choose not to do. They sublet that to the regional bodies to do it, and the regional bodies don't have bulletins that go out for public domain. But I do think it would be really good if they did. The second point was, just give me the heads up again.
It was about
streaming. Okay. So yes, I think when the difference is, if you're doing a small hall show, most people that are buying tickets are primarily buying them to watch their individual fighter. So I would say that 20% of the audience are coming because they want a night out to watch the boxing, and they will follow certain promoters. The other 80% are buying to watch their own fights. When you go to a televised card, you might have a boxer fighting on the card who's fifth down, but it might be Daniel Dubois, Joe Joyce, or Josh Kelly fighting David Avanesian, or Dylan White fighting, or somebody like that. So people will want to go to see all of the fights, not really just their particular friend fighting. And it's the people that are going specifically to watch their mate fight that we have to protect. That's why we have to protect them, because if they can watch their mate fight over the internet, there is a lot of people that would not pay those. They would just stay at home and watch it online. So it's trying to protect the fighters' incomes that we do that. We're working on something at the moment that is a halfway house between the two, but that's something that will come out down the line if this all happens. But generally, if you stream small hall shows in its entirety where a fighter is just building up his career against a journeyman, which is not the most exciting fight in that point of his career, and his mates can watch it online for free, they're going to do that. It will affect their ticket sales. And boxers don't deserve, in my opinion, to be affected in their pocket for no reimbursement. When a boxer fights on TV, they are getting a guaranteed purse. So therefore that's fine. When they fight on small halls, they're not. So ticket sales have to be protected for them, and you have to put the boxer's interest, in my opinion, before the interest of the promoter. But as I say, we're working on something as a halfway house, and there might be some news for that sometime this year.
Okay, and we've got Julio again. He says, do you think the UK and the US will remain the boxing capitals long term after quarantine?
No, I think what we're seeing is the Middle East are coming in with a shed load of money. It's the same as in football now. Who owns the major Premier League football clubs? And if you look at who owns the major football league football clubs, I think you can see who potentially can own the rights of boxing, and I think we will see it going that way. So no, I don't see that happening. I think that we're going to see other countries come in and buy the rights for boxing. And I'm not saying that's going to be good for the sport either.
Okay, and we've got John Power. He says, do you think pro boxers could get stuck in a backlog and get forgotten, and will boxing get back to where it was in the next 2 years if the virus is gone?
Will some boxers get stuck in the backlog and forgotten? I think that happens when you're not in a pandemic. I think that happens to a lot of boxers. I think it depends on what contract they've got, who their manager is, and how well they're looked after and managed and everything else. Do I think if there is a vaccine out, if a vaccine comes out or treatment comes out in September, as I'm hopeful will happen with this Oxford vaccine, then I think by March next year we'll be operationally somewhere back to normal, and I think by June next year we could be back to normal. But that would depend on us getting a vaccine in September. If we don't get a vaccine in September and we are sitting in January with no vaccine and no treatment, then boxing is under a severe problem.
You just answered the next question from someone as well. Karina just said asking about, do you think it will be back any sooner with the reducing of the social distancing?
Well, that's possible. I mean, but who's going to go? The problem is we're going about social distancing. I don't think enough people will want to go to small hall boxing. I mean, a boxer's tickets only have to be affected by 20%, and it won't be viable them to do it. So, if you reduce social distancing, you're still only going to get 500 people into your call or 600 people. It's just not going to be financially viable. Without a benefactor or some external funding, a promoter cannot do this on their own without some form of big sponsor or some television help.
Trevor says, can I have my jumper back? I am getting cold.
Well, Trevor, this is Trevor's jumper. For those of you who didn't miss it earlier, he's here for today. We've been in the garden having a celebration lunch for my wife's birthday, and he's very kindly let me wear his jumper. But he is going to give, for those of you, he's going to give charity donations. If you hook up with Trevor Padden on Facebook, tell him your charity, he will send donations to these charities. And it's been very kind. He's got quite a substantial amount of money that he is going to donate to charities, and we felt that this was the best way to do it. So friend to Trevor Padden, he'll give you charity, and you'll be able to check with the charity afterwards that he's done it.
Okay, we got Colin Henry. Why not fight overseas where lockdown is no longer in place and have it streamed?
Because of cost. Because if you fight overseas, you've got to get the cost of putting a show on overseas and flying boxers out there would be astronomical, and there wouldn't be enough people for small hall boxing to pay enough money to do it. The Hughie Fury world title fight with Joseph Parker was streamed on YouTube at £4.99, and I understand it got less than 600 buys. It just people would not pay for it. But again, you would have to have a benefit. There's something we're working on, Colin, that if it comes off, you'll see what I mean about how it can be done. But something like that would just not work. It would be financially disastrous.
Okay, and we've got Tommy says, hi Steve, hope you're well.
Hi Tom.
What do you think of Al Siesta's Cold War shows? Their timing, locations, level of competition, and the expectation of a £5.99 pay-per-view?
Let's see afterwards. I don't want to. Let's see let's just let it run its course. Let it happen. I wish him all the best with it, but let's just see afterwards, because I don't feel it's right. He's obviously trying to do something. My opinions on it, I don't think really I want to comment one way or the other, because it's not right. He's doing what he thinks he should do, but let's see about the success afterwards. And I wish him all the best with it.
John Power, will boxers get more money now they only fight on stream TV?
In what sphere? On boxers? And there's no money on fighting on stream TV. If you're talking about the big promoters, they haven't got a gate receipt, so they're going to be getting the bigger the fighters on television, I would imagine, will receive less money. And there is no other streaming that's going on. I think to try and sell streaming, to try and sell a stream and recoup your money by people buying into it, why would people pay for it when they can watch it for free on Sky or BT? It doesn't make sense to me. I don't see there being enough people on the take up. But no, there's no. As far as boxing is concerned now, let me tell you, the money for boxers is lower. There are no possibilities at the moment where boxers can earn more money than they were earning before. It's how much less they will earn.
And John again says, should government step in to help boxing?
Well, should they step in for any sport? I think there's a lot more things that government, and I'm saying this as a boxing person, boxing needs to find its feet. There's a lot of things the government needs to step in with money to help. It's a sport run by the Boxing Board of Control, who are a limited company in their own right, with substantial assets. So they've got their own money if they want to help boxing out, if they want to spend that, that's the board's decision. The promoters are self-employed individuals. I'm sure some promoters will have qualified for the grant that the government have given. The boxing managers are self-employed individuals. Again, some of them may have qualified for the self-employed grant. The boxers are self-employed. If they've been paying their taxes, then they would get could be getting some help from the government. I think that what the government's help that they've given so far, Rishi Sunak, I'm very critical of the government in a lot of ways at the moment, but as far as their assistance to businesses and self-employed, I think they've been very fair, and I think they've done enough. It's up to the industry now themselves to finance themselves going forward. If the board can't afford to help, then I'm afraid it's just going to be the fact that everybody has to, the strongest will survive, I'm afraid. It's just how it's going to be.
Grant Dennis said, hi Steve, do you know
Grant.
the current situation on medicals being signed off?
Yeah, I know you're planning to fight in this abroad show, Grant, and I've got some fighters due to fight in July. The board have just recently relocated, so they moved offices last week. I think it shouldn't be a problem. The board are getting themselves reset up. We have spoken to them, and you shouldn't have a problem. You shouldn't have a problem. But make sure all boxers that are fighting get them done sooner rather than later. If you leave it to lastminute.com, you could find there's a problem. But if you, I know you're talking about fighting in August, Grant. So if you get your medicals started the next couple of weeks, you should be fine.
And that is it for questions.
So, anyway, by the way, Grant, good luck in that fight. I hope it all goes well for you. As far as this is concerned, I hope you found it interesting. I know there's been boxing questions rather than financial questions. If you want to ask financial questions privately, you can, of course, message me. Apologies for the mess-ups earlier on with the internet, but where we are from home, it's not the great. Although I've got the best fibre broadband you've got, it isn't the most reliable at times, so apologies for that. But I really appreciate you watching and tuning in, and for those that are watching delayed, I hope you enjoy it. But please don't start tagging questions on afterwards, because people do, but please make sure that they seem to think that even if it's 11 o'clock on Sunday night, they can still fire questions over. But anyway, thanks a lot for watching. Thanks for watching on Catch Up. We will be back here next week, and if there's any subjects you want me to talk about, please fire them over and I'll do my best.